Hello and welcome to BBC News. I'm Regid Ahmed. It's been a busy weekend in US politics. At a gathering of conservatives in Washington, President Trump furiously condemned the investigation by Special Counsel Robert Mueller into Russian meddling. Meanwhile, in Brooklyn, Senator Bernie Sanders officially launched his 2020 campaign to be the Democratic candidate for president, adding his name to a field that now numbers at least 10 candidates. Kim Gittleson has the latest. Well, a new capsule for sending astronauts to the International Space Station has launched successfully in the United States. The craft, owned by SpaceX, has a dummy called Ripley on board. The plan is to resume manned flights from US soil later this year for the first time since 2011. Our science correspondent Palib Ghosh reports now on what NASA is calling the start of a new era. The British government has rejected suggestions that food standards could be relaxed to try to secure a trade deal with the United States after Brexit. Earlier, the US ambassador to the UK said Britain should embrace American farming methods to help seal an agreement. Our business correspondent Rob Young reports. A 17-year-old girl who was stabbed to death in a park in East London on Friday night has been named by her grandmother as Jodie Chesney. In an appeal on Facebook for witnesses to come forward, the grandmother said the stabbing had been an unprovoked attack. The teenager is the 18th person to be killed in the capital this year. Our correspondent John Donison reports. A 17-year-old boy has died after being stabbed in Greater Manchester. Police say they were called to an incident in Hale Barnes yesterday evening. The teenager was taken to hospital but later died. Two other boys, also aged 17, have been arrested on suspicion of murder. A car carrying 4 people has plunged into a canal in Leicestershire following a police chase. Officers were trying to stop the vehicle before it collided with a fence and went into the Grand Union Canal. 4 people were taken to hospital. 3 men and a woman have been arrested in connection with the theft of a motor vehicle and failing to stop. The EU's chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier says he doesn't believe the UK has enough time to approve Theresa May's Brexit deal and leave the European Union as planned on the 29th of March. Mr Barnier said that a technical extension of up to 2 months may be necessary, but ministers have rejected the suggestion. The number of smokers in England and Wales has fallen, while the number of visits to sexual health clinics has gone up, according to a report on council-run health services. The local government association is warning tough budget cuts are undermining efforts to improve healthcare. But the government says authorities received more than £3 billion of funding this year. Our health correspondent Dominique Hughes explains. Let's get some of the day's other news now. The US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces say they're making a final push on the last village held by Islamic State militants in Syria. They say they expect an offensive in Baghouz to be over soon. The final assault was delayed while women and children were evacuated from the village. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said she supports school students' protests about climate change. She said students might be frustrated at the time taken to move away from coal-based energy, but asked them to understand it was a challenge. Her comments appear to contradict some education officials who have criticised participants for skipping school and threatened them with exclusion. A memorial stone marking the site of the old synagogue in the eastern city of Strasbourg has been reinstated after it was knocked over by vandals during the night. It commemorates the building that was looted and destroyed by the Nazis in 1940. The vandalism comes 10 days after President Emmanuel Macron promised new laws to tackle the problem. This is BBC News, the headlines. President Trump has launched a fresh attack on Robert Mueller, saying the probe on alleged Russian interference is an attempt to take him out. A 17-year-old girl stabbed to death in a park in East London has been named as Jodie Chesney. She's the 18th homicide victim in the capital this year. Let's get more news now on that launch of the SpaceX rocket that's happened. Dr. Carly Howard is Assistant Director of the Department of Space Studies at the Southwest Research Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, can you explain what's so special about this particular rocket?
There's a couple of things that are particularly important about it. The big one being this is preparation for launching people. Traditionally, only governments have launched people, NASA, ESA, the Chinese, the Russians, but this is a commercial launch vehicle, and so it's basically sort of breaking into a traditionally sort of a governmental market, and it's going to really expand what we can do, but it's also going to provide a US crew, a way of launching US crews to the International Space Station. At the moment, the shuttle was retired, as I'm sure you know, and the US have been relying on the Russian Soyuz rockets, which were due to expire this year. I think they're actually going to expire next year now. But this gives us a new way of getting people to the International Space Station, so it's very exciting.
Is there also something special about the Dragon vehicle that means that NASA can do this at this time? I mean, I understand it's almost recyclable.
It is, and so one of the amazing things that SpaceX has been able to achieve is that it can reuse a lot of the components that go into the SpaceX vehicles. And so you might have seen previous videos of the boosters landing amazingly on barges in the middle of the Atlantic. And so that drives down the cost, which is a really important thing for anyone that works in the space industry, because the cost of the launch vehicles is traditionally one of the most expensive part of any mission. And so anytime we can decrease that cost, it means we get a little bit more science for the same amount of dollars. So that's a really great result.
It's also extraordinary that it's all automated. I mean, the science has come an incredibly long way. What does it mean now for space exploration in terms of perhaps letting us do something that we couldn't do before?
I think the world is their oyster, to be honest. I mean, they've shown time and time again that they can do the hard things that are required for spaceflight. And so this, of course, didn't have people on it. I think their next big test is going to show that they can successfully and safely launch people. And if they can do that, which there's all indications from this launch, it was incredibly successful, look like they can. Now, the launch isn't quite there yet. The capsule hasn't docked with the International Space Station, so there's a few things ahead of them. That's due to happen Sunday. And so we'll be looking to see how that goes. But so far, it's been a great success for them.
So just briefly, if this continues to be successful, beyond docking with the International Space Station, what does it mean for the exploration of deep space, perhaps?
Well, that's the bit that I'm particularly interested in. That's my area of expertise. And so what I'm hoping is anytime there's a commercial player, that there's more breaking into the market, it drives the cost down. And so my hope is that this really starts decreasing the cost of every launch that we see. And thus we can maybe launch more satellites for the same amount of dollars. And so we'll be getting more science for our buck. That's my big hope.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on it as it attempts to dock with the ISS. Dr. Carly Howard, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Firefighters in Australia's southeast are battling a number of out-of-control bushfires which have forced the evacuation of residents. This week, the country's Bureau of Meteorology announced that it had experienced its hottest summer on record. Sophia Tran-Thompson reports. Now, every spring, Japan celebrates cherry blossom season, with tourists flocking to the country in droves to enjoy the spectacle. But the cherry blossom is also an economic powerhouse, as Catherine Corelli reports. Beautiful. Now, in the aftermath of the Second World War, many British families were sent to Germany to help it rebuild. It was a difficult time, and there was still much anger and resentment between the two sides. Now, the memories of one young boy who moved from Wales to Berlin have been turned into a film. Thomas Morgan reports.
Rachel.
Hello, Lewis.
I remember it very surprisingly vividly.
Kim Brooke was only 8 years old when his family moved to Germany in 1947. His father, Captain Walter Brooke, was charged with rebuilding the shattered city after the Second World War. Starring Jason Clarke and Keira Knightley, The Aftermath is a film loosely based on Kim's memories.
My dad used to talk about it a bit, and he used to say a number of times, it's not about revenge or anything like that, or retribution. My job is to rebuild.
This house is requisitioned for British use by order of the Control Commission.
And despite advice to the contrary, Kim struck a close friendship with his 7-year-old German housemate Heike, earning himself the nickname Der Eisbrecher, the icebreaker. And it was the children that broke down the barriers between the two families.
And there was a very, very important turning point which happened the following Christmas. We decided that all the children, all 6 of us, would get together and pretend we were a choir. And we sang Silent Night, and we all did it in German, so it was Stille Nacht. And it was a very moving moment for my parents and indeed for the Ladigers. And the tears were rolling down their face by the time we'd done it.
The love affair between Kim's mother and the German father is fictional, but it's a key element in both the film and the novel that inspired the screenplay, which was written by Kim's son.
It's a strange feeling, but it's exciting too. You know, it's nice that this story, the essence of the story, which is really about forgiveness and reconciliation, is there, you know, all the way through, I think, in the DNA of the film.
The production team have stayed in close contact with the Brooks throughout the filmmaking process, and meeting the stars has been one of the highlights of this artistic journey.
What was it like to see Keira Knightley portraying your mother?
It was great. I gave her a peck of the cheek and I said, "Hi, Mum."
Thomas Morgan reporting there. Now, they're among the most daring motorbike riders in the UK, and yet some of the Tigers display team are as young as 5. In fact, all of the stunt riders are under 17, and they're helping to keep the sport going after the last of the famous adult display teams broke up. Here's Mike Bushell with more. Danger-seeking Mike Bushell there, doing something I would absolutely never do, but congratulations to him, I guess. Let's go to the weather now with Nick Miller.